the Joy and Justice podcast, an extension of the Standing in the Gap Fund. This podcast takes you behind the stories that shape our collective understanding of justice and how truth-telling can transform communities. In our last episode, we talked about art as a form of truth, how storytelling itself can be an act of justice and care. Today, we continue that conversation by exploring the role of media, how we see, how we interpret, and how stories are framed for the world. And there's no one better to have that conversation with than the one and only Soledad O'Brien, a journalist, producer, and storytelling whose work has shaped how millions understand justice, identity, and truth. Soledad, thank you for joining me. Soledad O'Brien is an award-winning journalist, producer, and the CEO of Soledad O'Brien Productions. She has spent more than 3 decades telling stories that expose inequity and celebrate resilience, bringing depth and humanity to the headlines. As an executive producer of The Perfect Neighbor, Soledad helped bring forward a powerful story of justice, community, and care. Her career has spanned networks like CNN, MSNBC, and HBO. She continues to use her platform to elevate truth and create space for conversations that matter. Welcome, Soledad.
Thank
you
you.
so much for being here.
Oh, my
I'm really,
goodness.
really grateful for you joining us and for your ongoing partnership.
Oh my gosh. It's my honor. I'm saying, oh my gosh, because I feel like, no, thank you
Yeah.
for all that you're doing. It's so remarkable.
Well, the sisterhood is real.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
sisterhood is real. So we're going to get into this conversation today as we talk a little bit about what we're doing with Standing in the Gap and the impact campaign for The Perfect Neighbor. And it's exciting to just be in that project and share that project with you. But we want to take a step back and really get your expertise and your experience and your perspective really on the role of media and how all these things played out in AJ's case.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if I ever told you, but at Howard, I was an African American Studies and Political Science major.
I did
and
not
my
know that.
master's was on the role of media in the civil rights movement.
Oh,
So I
interesting.
think about this a lot, right? The
Yeah.
role of people who documented the photographs from that time and how that moved the world. And so you've covered stories like Hurricane Katrina, Trayvon Martin, George Floyd, moments that in modern history changed America. How has media evolved in telling these stories or not evolved? Like, where are we?
Yeah. It's kind of a mixed bag. I mean, in a lot of ways, not evolved, right? I think there's tremendous bias in reporting, meaning in choosing the stories that will make air, right? Every day you make decisions. Is this going to be on or is it not going to be on? And those decisions are made around, well, who's the victim? Who's the perpetrator? Do we care about them? Will our audience care about that? Those are all judgments on human beings. And so I think in a lot of ways, we haven't changed a lot because sometimes executives will talk about, well, our audience won't care about this. And I've always been amazed because I have found that audiences care very deeply. Audiences love a good story. They want to understand issues. And I think often TV newsrooms underestimate the audience, because it's about storytelling. It's about capturing people through explaining what's unfolding. In some ways, though, I do think more people are sensitized to it. I remember in the killing of George Floyd, the number of people, I'm sure you had the same thing. If you had any white friends, they were calling you and you're like, oh, please.
What to do? Like,
Right.
how to understand this?
And I think it was so shocking for people. And I had spent so much time, especially at CNN, reporting on civil rights era heroes and sort of things that had happened. And so I was baffled. Like, this has been happening for a long time. And I think for some of them, they felt like, oh my gosh, is this, I just saw it on TV. Is this really happening?
Yes.
And I was kind of like, I'm stunned that you're stunned.
I'm stunned that you're stunned.
So I think in that way, people do have a sense of, yes, it does happen. Yes, there can be proof it's recorded. But even when it's not recorded, like these things do happen. So I think maybe in the audience, there's more movements. But I know anytime I've tried to pitch a story in a newsroom, about racial violence, it's a tough sell. It is a tough sell.
Wow. Yeah, I think, in the very beginning, that weekend after, we lost AJ, there was no local news coverage about it. It really wasn't until we were able to get in touch with Joy Reid to break the news on MSNBC that we started to see, her story reflected in the media. And of course, as family, to your point, we were just so disappointed and so afraid, right, that this would not get covered, that this would get buried.
And it's crazy to think, like, so this person was shot through a door
Right.
and killed. And I have to explain to people on the phone why they should care. Like,
Yes.
that's
Yes.
insane.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, that was absolutely our experience, and like really grateful for those folks in the media who got
Joy's
it.
amazing. She's
Shout out to Joy
Yes,
Reid, like
absolutely.
all day, every day. I
Yes.
tell people all the time, she's a real one.
She really is.
She is. So in recent years, body cam footage, which we know we finally got a hold of in this case, and I think, as The Perfect Neighbor enters the world and people begin to see that, I do think, we will get the kind of attention around AJ's case, kind of like with Ahmaud Arbery. It was months after things happened that footage was released, that the world really had a reaction to what happened to him. But from your perspective, as this type of footage, whether it's bystander footage, like in the case of George Floyd, make it out into the public sphere, it's impossible, right, for people to ignore racial violence. How has that type of transparency changed journalism and the public consciousness?
As a reporter, I've always really liked any kind of video, body cam, bystander, ring camera. And listen, there's a lot of conversations around do police use it in a way that is dangerous and unfair to people of color? And I think the answer is absolutely, sometimes. But as a person who likes to have content to look at, I have always really appreciated in the documentary, in The Perfect Neighbor, is a very unusual thing to be able to tell a story mostly with body cam. And the director, Geeta, has really talked about how complicated it was to gather up and just put in chronological order as many as 10, 15 different camera angles from police officers who are not necessarily great at shooting over years, right? Plus ring camera, plus, so I think that that alone just makes it just fascinating to unfold. But at the same time, I do think it allows people to step out of it. One of the challenges you have as a reporter is you never have the video, right? You rarely have the video in most cases. And so you get there and the scene is done. And then you go and you interview certain people, right. And then you kind of, tell a story where you're piecing it together. But in this case, you see it unfold.
Intact,
and I have found, as I think trust in journalism and trust in reporters has really lessened. It's been amazing to say, just step out of it. Here, this is police body cam.
Yeah.
This is what the police say. I don't have to characterize. I don't have to give you the something like this.
Right.
Here, listen to them.
Yeah.
Listen to what they say. Listen to what they whisper to each other. Listen to what the perpetrator does and says. And it's just such a great way of really understanding a story without having a layer of, well, here's my take.
Right.
Who I decided to include and how I decided to shoot.
The unfiltered truth.
Absolutely. And so I think that's both remarkable just in terms of it's really not been done before, but also in the storytelling aspect. I think it really helps audiences see what happened.
Yeah. No, we're really grateful that we have it. And, we wouldn't know so many stories without it. We wouldn't know George Floyd without that bystander footage, and it wouldn't have changed the world. And we hope AJ's story does the same thing.
Right.
Especially in a time like this.
It is a crazy time, right? It really is. It is a crazy time. But I think some videos break through. Some things break through. And I definitely believe that's going to be the case.
I do too. So with Standing in the Gap, which is the impact campaign for the film, and of course, we started Standing in the Gap even before the film came to light, our vision for it was to connect these themes around justice. So making sure there's justice in incidents where there's racial violence, connecting the theme around healing, right? Because there needs to be repair. Families have been devastated. And so we need to support families by bringing healing resources, but also culture. I spent a lot of my time in New Orleans and, post Katrina. And one of the things, I learned in that city was the role of culture in supporting the human experience of healing from trauma. And so we've incorporated that into the impact campaign and into standing in the gap.
Which is so amazing. I mean, the campaign is great, and I think so often people who are outsiders, right, who are just watching the story or hearing about the story, never think of it beyond, oh, this happened, period.
Yeah.
Then you have the devastation left behind, right? That's when the aftermath starts unfolding, and it can be so hard and so unsupported, and the media, if they came at all, isn't there anymore. They usually have no interest. I remember once I had a news director talk about Katrina fatigue, and he was talking about the audience. The audience must be tired. We're tired of covering it. I'm like, who really has Katrina fatigue? People whose houses haven't been rebuilt.
Right.
People whose the insurance companies have blown them off. Like,
right.
And it was just so ironic, right? Like, are you really going to complain about Katrina fatigue? In front of these people who have Katrina fatigue? And so I think people often forget. Like, once the cameras go, if they've ever come, there's so much that has to be done. And I love that standing in the gap is literally standing in the gap of, we're here to help those things happen and to bridge that gap and help people get the resources they need, because no one else does that.
Yeah. And from my perspective, culture is one of those things that helps people care.
Right.
And I think the media has a role in helping people care about the things that are happening in our world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And people do care. Again, I often think there's a sense of like, they won't find it important. And if it's told well, if people understand it, I have found that people want to understand an issue, and they want to understand the context. So, for example, in this case, Stand Your Ground, as I've talked about this doc coming out, people have been like, well, tell me exactly what Stand Your Ground, right? They don't really know. They kind of sort of know.
They do.
How did it come to be? Where did it come from? Why does it exist? And how has it had an impact, not just in this case, in other cases? So I have found that audiences actually are really smart, and they really want to understand.
Yeah. And so basically right there, like, where do you think we are on telling these stories of racial violence? Like, how do we help our audiences care about folks who lose their lives in this way?
I think the doc does a great job, and I think the doc leverages every single thing that you have from it, right? You have body cam. I think Gita has said 90-something% of the doc is in body. I mean, it's remarkable.
Yeah.
And so people will care because of that. And I think it would be much harder to get people to care if you had a reporter standing in a neighborhood saying, behind me, you can see where, it just doesn't have an emotional impact. So I think there's this tremendous, I use opportunity for lack of a better word, because of course it's around a horrific, horrible event that never should have happened. But I think there's this opportunity to have people really understand a policy issue much more deeply and much better than if I were to give you a lecture and draw a chart about, Stand Your Ground and where it came from and how it passed through the legislature,
right,
and et cetera,
exactly.
et cetera. Like, this is a much more emotional connection to policy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to talk a little bit about Powerful. And you recently launched a new scholarship in Ajika's name, which every time I think about it, it just brings a tear to my eye that her legacy will live on through that scholarship. So can you tell us about what inspired you to start this work? And can you tell us a little bit about the recipient of the first scholarship?
Yeah, my husband and I started this foundation actually in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. And I just remember, young women mostly would come up to me and say, can you help me? I need $6,248 to go to college. And I was like, well, that's not $1 million. Like, I probably know 50 people who could contribute a little,
Exactly.
And so it just seemed kind of doable. And so we started the foundation that way. We have we have 25 students at any time. I know them all and I know their backstory. I've now been to several weddings and I mean,
so
it's
sweet.
amazing. It's been really, really great. And we've had some really fantastic support. But I remember thinking that one of the scholar who's the recipient of this scholarship in AJ's name is just, she lost her mom and she has been trying so hard to do everything basically as an orphan. I mean, imagine being 20 years old and on your own completely. And she's such a great student and she's such a great young woman. And so I asked Pam, AJ's mom, if when I know there's like a media tour, so everybody's very busy, but at some point I would love for them to get together because I think AJ's mom gives off such amazing healing energy. Allow me to get into my Oprah touchy feely, but like every time I hear her talk, and it's a lot, she just is so centered around remembering AJ and also just being she's just so amazing as a touchstone and in a terrible, terrible story that, as she
Yeah.
says, never should have happened. So I would love for our scholar to meet her when the time is right, because I think she would just feel like I will be able to occasionally reach out and tell her of the things I'm accomplishing and the things I'm doing and the life I'm building.
Oh
And it'll
God,
be
I
like,
get chills,
it'll be like my
honestly.
mom,
Yeah,
knows what I'm trying to do. So I think that they're going to be a
absolutely.
very great match, and we're looking forward to that. But all of our scholars, all of them are they're remarkable. It's so hard. It's so hard. One of the reasons we started this foundation was my husband's mom and dad. His dad was a professor. His mom taught at a kindergarten classes, and my mom was a high school teacher. My dad was a professor. And you realize the tremendous privilege you have in navigating college when you've just had people go through college, right? If
Exactly.
there's someone who's like, oh,
Exactly.
don't do that, or oh, look
Exactly.
at you got to
Right.
start
Someone
doing
who knows the road.
let's tour it. Here's what we should ask. Here's what we should do. It's just such a tremendous advantage. And often people don't think of the ways in which they're privileged, but just having someone in your life who's gone to college means you're much more likely to go. And most of our scholars just have never had anybody go to college.
Yes.
I remember, we helped them get internships. And the first day we realized we had to tell people like what to wear. Because if your parents have worked in an office building, then you know the outfit.
Right.
You
You
know?
know the outfit.
But if
The-
your parents have not ever been in a professional kind of career, then you don't know the outfit and you don't know the secret handshake and you don't know all the things. We have one scholar who's amazing. She's now a lawyer on her way to partner. She's
Wow,
fantastic.
it's incredible.
And she, at one point, was the closest Black woman on the verge of becoming a chess master. She's amazing. She's amazing. And I remember she did an internship at an investment bank, but everybody else with her, there were kids whose parents were clients of the bank, because that's how
Mm,
internships work.
that is how internships work.
And
Yeah.
so she was just like, I'm not dressed right. And I don't know the secret. And by the way, she's smarter than everybody, like everybody. And I just remember thinking, like, it's the soft skills that are going to be the challenge because she has the ability to do it. And so that's what we've tried to stand in the gap, if you will, of like helping people say, this is not magic. Here's what you wear. Here's the secret handshake. Here's all the rules. No one told you this, but let me just tell you, let me tell you how you do it. This is what you're going to do. This is how you come in. It says 9:00 start. That means 8:30. This is, et cetera, because we all learned that if we had the opportunity.
Yeah. I really think about our scholar and Pam having that relationship. I think about the other women who are going to come behind her.
Yes,
I think
yes.
about Africa, AJ's daughter, and just being in this legacy. So, thank you so much for
Oh my
that.
gosh, thank you guys. Yeah.
It means the world just to know that AJ's legacy will live on in all these different ways through these different folks as well.
One thing that's so interesting in the documentary is to see what a remarkable woman AJ was. And then Pam, of course, talks about her all the time in the conversations that happen after screenings. And so, yeah, it just feels so right to have her connected to this scholarship with a young woman who I think is trying to, figure out how to be remarkable too.
Yeah, well, thank you, because as we say all the time, AJ told us that the world would know her name, and I love that beyond just the film and what we're doing with the fund, that there's all these other ways in which her legacy, she will be remembered and live through. But also what you're doing is very similar to an impact campaign, right? So let's talk a little bit about why impact campaigns are important, to really extend the work beyond, you know, the moment of a documentary or of a film or et cetera. So can you talk a little bit about impact campaigns and why you think they're
Yeah,
critical?
if you think that what happened to AJ is the first and only time a stand your ground case has resulted in someone's death, and if you think that it doesn't affect people of color more than other people, that particular policy, it means you don't understand, you haven't seen enough. And so I think impact campaigns are a way to say, actually, there are so many other people who are affected who we can help. Like, we can bring this story to more people so it has a bigger impact, but also we can make sure the impact that we can bring to people is even more. We can help people who are struggling. We can help people. I think there's so many people who never think about the moment after.
Yeah.
Right. So then what does happen to the kids? How do you navigate that? If they've been utterly traumatized, how do you manage that? What do you do the next day? Right. The story ends, but the story really begins for everybody else who survived the next day. And so I think an impact campaign is an amazing way of bringing attention and allowing people who are affected to say, okay, I want to get on board. I want to understand it more. I want to donate. I want to help, because it's not just this one person and this one story. Unfortunately, this is a big problem around a policy that I think a lot of people look back and say, this has disproportionately impacted people of color.
Absolutely. Well, I am so grateful to you for joining us here, but just the partnership and the sisterhood and your graciousness and your generosity for participating in this project and helping
Oh, you're
us
so sweet. I so
continue.
appreciate that. But I have to say, every time I see you're just a go get. Like, I watch you as everything is happening on the stage. Usually after the film, people go on stage and you're just like managing. I mean, you roll in and you're just going at 97 miles an hour. It's so impressive. So thank you for those nice words. But really, you have done, and your team have done, such an amazing job. And considering, like, this is your family. This is not an anonymous person that you've never heard of, and at night you can just go home and put it on a shelf. Like, this is your family. So I know for everybody involved, it's just been emotionally really, really hard. And so I'm just so impressed and so amazed by what you guys have done. And I think standing in the gap is so important. I also love the name because it really explains what you do. Like,
That's
I get
right.
it. You stand in the gap. There is a gap, and you stand in it, and you help people cross over that gap. And I'm just so impressed by all of it. So,
Well, our mantra is "We got us."
yeah.
And you're part of that. You know, you are part of our we and part of our family. And we're just grateful.
Well,
to
thank you. And I'm grateful as well.
All right.
Transparency matters. How stories are told and who gets to tell them shapes the way our society responds to justice, truth, and healing. Through the Joy and Justice podcast, we'll continue lifting up the voices of those who use their gifts in art, in media, and community to make change. If this conversation inspired you, please subscribe, share the podcast, and visit standinginthegapfund.org to learn more and donate. Your support helps us sustain this work, reach more families, and continue building a culture of care and accountability. Thank you.